Hello, this is Steve Scully again with the instruction manual as it is written in the Cosmos, and we're reading Chapter 6, Applications in Society. Section 1, Physics of Consciousness. The model disclosed herein is directly applicable to consciousness. As has been alluded to at several points throughout this text, there are connections between how conscious beings interact and how bodies in the cosmos interact. In fact, they are more than connections. The same mechanisms directly apply. The better we understand consciousness, the more society can change to a state of awareness. This book functions as a transmitter of information. You cannot tell this book what it says. It is just a book of words. What you can do is read it. In this way, you choose to function as a receiver. In all communications, there is no way to send a message without these two functions. We are all capable of both, for we are both. But if two people both are functioning as transmitters, for example, in an argument, then they are as two like poles of a magnet repelling one another. When two people are functionally opposites, for example, in a conventional student-teacher relationship, then they function much more like two opposing poles of a magnet, bringing attraction. I say function much more like because, well, it is complicated. What perspective does the student have? Are they open to receive? What about the teacher? Are they open to receive? Or are the students combative, making a stand against something they disagree with on some fundamental level that manifests as them not really listening? Or is the teacher closed-minded and not hearing the student's perspective? If we look through a typical array of classroom students, some are eager learners who fully accept their environment and absorb the information presented. Others do not attend class simply because they choose not to. This range is a result of the way that people react to a given stimulus and sheds light onto human nature. When something is flawed by nature, it can still succeed at accomplishing many things. School, like many other things we do, goes against the most important aspect of reality, freedom. Students are not really given a true choice. You must do this. It is not a two-way street. Some do not mind this aspect of school and go and learn and become well educated in the topics which the schooling transmits to them as open receivers. Others make a stand against this and rebel in several ways. This rebellion comes at their expense, as society is designed in a way where if you do not comply, then you will suffer. In other words, your grades will suffer, your life will become more difficult, and you will struggle as a result. However, what school does not account for is the knowledge that comes from the school of life. We are much more than our resumes. The question that arises here is it right to comply with something which is forced? If we have no way of having perceived value in the eyes of others except to jump through the hoops society puts before us, forcing individuals not at gunpoint, but by the sheer weight of the system, then is this the fundamentally right decision to make? Or is it right to stand against the forcefulness and struggle greatly and seemingly unnecessarily as a result? The struggle would suggest it is wrong, as if we are rewarded for making the right decision by becoming respected members of society who specifically follow the rules put forth by society. This is an example of the physics of consciousness because when we go with the flow, our experiences are generally easier than when we go against the flow. The river of the flow of society has actual momentum as we flow in a general direction like a wave function. If we try to go in the other direction, then it is the same as trying to walk backwards through a river. With the entire society's momentum in one direction, like a deep and wide river, this can become so overwhelming that all we can do is to go with the flow, for we are pulled along with it. However, like a mass in the cosmos, when we feed our minds, the mass of our consciousness grows, but a given problem does not change. It remains generally the same problem. If the problem is the flow of society, where it is a deep and wide river unable to be opposed, then the solution is to outgrow it. As we learn something, our consciousness grows like going through the atoms of the periodic table. If all we do is feed a single subject, then that can become unstable like a radioactive element. In order to outgrow our problems, it is necessary then to feed a larger system by learning many different subjects. In this way, we can grow our conscious awareness so vastly that it acts like a planet next to an atom, or like a star, or like a black hole, or beyond. The more that we pull into our conscious awareness and feed energy to it by learning about things, the more massive and dense our minds become. As a result, what was once a rushing river, wide and deep, becomes a stream, then becoming an unnoticed trickle because we have grown, and then the flow we face no longer produces resistance. Moreover, the growth has other effects. We each can be envisioned as a mass in the mental cosmos of consciousness. If our mass is small in a high-energy environment, then we act as low-pressure systems which absorb from the environment and attract high-pressure systems. Like a baby being admired by all, adults and children have a certain pull to one another because of this, where there is an imbalance so great that people consciously attract. Children readily absorb and adults radiate. Age brings with it a certain stubbornness and immovable aspect to human consciousness. This is not just because people are stubborn. Rather, as we experience life, the mass and density of our mental consciousness grows and becomes more and more difficult for others to move, without at least getting first close to them consciously through actual understanding. Seeing someone's perspective is akin to getting close to their mental consciousness sufficiently. From a physics standpoint, this is a positional relationship. When we are consciously close to someone, we feel them like gravity. We are attracted to or repulsed by them like magnets. If we are distant consciously, we are literally not close enough in the mental universe to observe interaction. And how we interact at close distances depends on our relative mass and density. Like two stars, or a star and a planet, or a star and the particles of its electromagnetic field, how they move relative to one another depends on their mass ratio. However, when consciousness grows like a mass in the cosmos, our capacity to influence our surroundings at larger distances also grows. People whom we could not impact their position before in the mental cosmos are then moved. This is a result of a high energy environment for our mind. Notably, all is equal. As discussed, zero is infinity. There is a perfect balance between all things as precisely equals. We are all equals. Therefore, it is important for us to recognize that we are all teachers and students. We are all transmitters and receivers. No one is just a transmitter, and no one is just a receiver. Society at large tends to distinguish between who is teacher and who is student. Children are undoubtedly considered the students. This is half of the picture and does not appreciate the other half. The other half being most apparent in children who have yet to absorb much to teach us about the world around us, and yet who know more about the world around us than we can ever dream. A child's innocence, imagination, and capacity to fully express and be their true selves without any limitations is perhaps the greatest lesson ever taught by an individual. And as all of us were children and are, it is taught by each and every one of us. When we learn about how the world works, we are taught hypothesized limitations. As we presently function, we actively teach one another of our limitedness, especially through silence or otherwise, and so this innate knowledge of our potential is left in our childhoods. As a society, we do not value the actual tangible wisdom of children, and so we teach people of a hierarchical structure of leadership where the leaders are transmitters and the rest are receivers. In reality, all are equals and we each have something to say and something to learn. Say is a word that implies the message to be spoken. The perception that only spoken word or written word is a means of communication limits the avenues through which we are open to receive. Body language, action, and most generally, every single thing that we do carries with it a message for all who are open to listen, including the individual themselves. Even non-action is an action. For example, when people choose to change society through action, their actions speak for them. They also speak and also write and also use many forms of communication to transmit their message. However, their actions speak the truest message. In the same way, their non-actions speak for them. A good example of this is the United States. Quote, the land of the free. Is it? As someone who lives within the borders of the United States, I can look back in my life and examine the events. One thing I can say with certainty never occurred. I never agreed to this. At no point in my life was I ever given a complete disclosure on the purpose, objective, and role of the government, and more importantly, never given a basis for why it is able to rule over my decisions, take my money, impose its will on me, and mandate my actions within the confines of its expectations while hiding its actions. I cannot simply argue that my freedom supersedes any court's judgment and that I opt out of the system while exercising my actual freedom to remain where I live without being imposed on. Am I free? We can use labels all we want. The actions we take speak the truth. This goes far beyond simple labels. Taxation is theft by another name. Moreover, is inefficient use of energy. It literally leeches from society, taking from people who cannot afford it and thinning the weak points in the house of society even further. Like a house whose foundational bricks, where the most stress is, are actively thinned and the materials placed on the top of the structure to make it stand taller, where it then becomes more top-heavy. When taxation takes from people against their will, it causes undue stress on the system at large. Like an engine where the energy is pointlessly converted several times before its use, where inefficiencies are rampant, taxation takes from individuals who invested the energy to make the energy and simply throws it around at whatever it sees fit because, well, there's so much of it. What happens to a system when it uses energy and its environment takes energy from it? It shrinks. When vast sums of energy produced by millions upon millions of people are directed by only a few individuals, then those making the decisions put no energy into the actual creation, and so they inherently are inefficient in decision making. They cannot possibly give as much thought into how to use such vast sums of money as all the individuals cumulatively would have if it was not taken from them. This makes the system of society slow down, producing symptoms which are used as further evidence for the need of such a system. The feedback loop of a system which creates problems, then grows in an attempt to correct those problems and thereby creates more problems and repetitively follows this process is inevitably going to cause collapse. It cannot go on forever. This is because a government system is, by design, based on only part of all things. Therefore, it has a ceiling to how much it can grow. When it grows too large, it again follows the same mechanics as the periodic table of elements. Larger and larger systems are initially stable and show no substantial signs of their inevitable instability, but as they continue to grow to their peak, they become highly unstable. More and more laws and regulations are put in place. Such guidelines act as resistors in the electronic system of society. When every turn there's a resistor present, the flow of energy ceases. No one would design electronics where there are resistors at every turn, preventing flows of energy. However, the way we operate our society is built in precisely this way. Over time, it squeezes on society until movement of energy is prevented so substantially that system failure is observable to such a high degree that it is indisputable. Leading up to it, there are only more energetic signs that start small and subtle until they become large and obvious. As a system falls, it becomes more out of balance with its environment, like a low-pressure system, and so it extracts energy from its surroundings. As the way that we function as a society falters, it extracts energy from more and more individuals as it falls to feed its very survival. This manifests in increased taxes and regulations and imbalance at large. Freedom only exists in one form, and limitations thereon in any way literally go against the objective. The question of how to solve these pressing issues in society requires awareness to how the universe functions. Section B, the philosophy of chaos theory. One of the most important discoveries in scientific history is that of chaos theory. The theory comes from the recognition that small differences in the initial conditions when a system is analyzed yield divergent outcomes for dynamic systems, which makes the long-term prediction of their behavior seemingly impossible. This is summarized by Edward Lorenz as, quote, chaos, when the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future. One of the most common examples of this is found in weather modeling. While we can accurately model weather to a degree within short time spans especially, with increasing time from the original prediction comes increasing error. This means much more than that we cannot accurately model weather systems for extended periods of time. The most immediate application of chaos theory is our lives. When we peer into the future and envision events taking place, we are forming an approximate prediction of what the outcome will be. Just like with weather, we can accurately predict the future to a degree. However, the degree to which we can do so depends on the degree of awareness of variables. In other words, if the variables are largely accounted for, then the degree of approximation is low, and so the future is essentially predictable. An example would be that I predicted I would write this sentence in some general form before doing so as an example. The exact wording was somewhat present in my head, but not to the degree where every word was known, and so it was in some ways still an approximation, but it was a very accurate prediction. The reason for this is because I was well informed of what actions I was going to take as they were my own and they were in the immediate future. Their variance from my prediction was small because there was very little time for the environment to change, and I was highly aware of the variables. What this tells us is that the more awareness we have, the higher the degree of accuracy of our predictions. However, it also tells us that the less aware we are, the lower our degree of accuracy with our predictions. For example, if someone were to be tried in court for an individual action or string of actions in their lives, the judge does not know the full extent of the person's life which produced the action. Therefore, the judge is inherently and inevitably envisioning an approximate present. The purpose of judgment, as it is intended, is to bring justice, order, balance. And so, in order for a judgment to be just, it must be one which results in the outcome of bringing balance to the situation. However, given the approximation of the ruling, the judge may decide that in order to bring balance, to bring order, it is necessary to imprison the individual for a span of years. This is predictive in nature. If it is not treated as such, then it is purely punishment with no empathy or compassion for the human being, which is flawed to the core. I cannot say what I will be doing in several years with any specificity or certainty. I can certainly hypothesize and suppose in ways that I am strongly compelled to believe, as the one who best knows myself, but many things can happen. It is like attempting to predict the weather further in advance. It enters the realm of generalizations, seasonal weather. Will even this hold true indefinitely? At some point, our approximations no longer match our reality. When it comes to judging individuals for their actions, it is the same way. It may result in some intended change, but not necessarily. And at what cost? As people who have not lived each other's lives, we are not fit to condemn one another. We do not even know one another. Each individual is the only one who has led their life. They are the one most informed on all of the variables, and thereby the most able to make a prediction of their future that can stand the tests of time and approximations. When we judge one another individually, balance does not come. Indeed, one of the most intuitive axioms that we learn as children can easily be applied to dispute the entire role of governance by others. Two wrongs do not make a right. If an individual commits something that is wrong, how does limiting their freedoms, taking money, property, and years of their life, if not the rest of their life, somehow bring justice? It is as if a robber has played the role of judge and chosen to steal from the wrongdoers to bring order. The robber does not bring order, only wealth to themselves at the expense of others of their choosing. And so the system becomes more out of balance, manifesting in more chaotic storms. And so we find ourselves at a crossroads. All right, that's the end of section B of chapter 6. I'll be back in my next video with the innovation paradigm shift singularity and more on this subject of physics of consciousness. Thanks for listening.